When I was around 6, my parents divorced and my dad was soon given full custody, as my mom is an alcoholic and had racked up a few DUIs and such. Anyway, me, my younger sister, and my dad moved to a new neighborhood and we transferred to the nearby elementary school. The school was pretty close to my new house, maybe 5 to 7 or so blocks away. Close enough to walk, but my sister and I were too young to walk alone. Sometimes our dad would walk us to school in the morning and then walk back, and less commonly, he'd walk to pick us up. Most of the time, he picked us up in his black Mazda. The way pickups worked at my school was pretty common. We went out with our class, stood by our teacher and classmates, and when a car pulled up, designated staff members would ask who the student was that they were picking up and then go find them with their class and escort them to the car. Seeing as my mom was in jail at this time, the only person who ever picked us up was my dad. One day, I was in 3rd grade and my sister was in 1st. We were waiting outside to be picked up. After being outside for only a few minutes, my little sister came over to me and said, "Someone who wasn't Dad was in a car to pick us up." He'd said both of our names and they'd found her first. She said that he smiled at her and told her our dad had told him to pick us up that afternoon, but she said she wanted to find me first before she got in the car since she didn't recognize him. Thankfully, she did that. Our dad had always told us not to talk to strangers, so I grabbed my teacher and told her what happened. She got a really alarmed look on her face and told us to stay where we were, while she told another teacher or something. Our dad arrived to pick us up a few minutes later and we got home safely. We told him about it and we all had a long talk about safety protocol. He asked my sister to describe the man in the car and he called the police and gave them the best description he could, although my sister was very young and wasn't very focused on important details like that. A few weeks later it happened again, but this time he said my name. My dad had given the school the same info he'd given the police, but presumably he had multiple vehicles because my sister said he'd been in a red car. And this one was black, similar to my dad's. I saw the black car and ran up to it, but luckily I caught a glimpse of the face before I opened the door and hopped in. He was middle-aged, really pale, with a really angular face. We made eye contact, and his mouth was smiling, but his eyes looked really wrong to me, squinty and almost angry. I turned back towards the carpool assistant who delivered me to the car to alert her, but by the time I did, the car was gone and I couldn't give many details. My dad contacted the police again, but without a license plate, they weren't able to do much. The last time I saw him wasn't until months later, near the end of the school year. I was walking home with a big group of kids that lived in my neighborhood, and he drove by and slowed down the car to try and talk to us. I recognized his face immediately and alerted the other kids to run. Luckily, we were only about 3 houses down from where one of my friends lived, and we all piled into her house, concerning her parents significantly as we explained the situation. I never saw him again after that. My dad started dating my now stepmom and we moved to her neighborhood and switched schools shortly after. I still think about him occasionally though. His face was actually in my dream a few nights ago, which reminded me to write about my experience. To this day, I'm in my 20s now. I don't know how he knew our names, how he knew anything about us really. It's very scary to think about what would have happened to my tiny little sister if she'd gotten in the car with that man and what might have happened to me if I had. So this story starts when I was in middle school. I met a guy who I'll call Chase. Chase was the new kid in my 7th grade English class. He looked like a typical skater or BMX type of kid. Long, floppy Justin Bieber style hair and wore shirts and hats that had the Monster logo on them. Insert Kyle meme reference. For the first week or so, we didn't really talk or interact with each other. At lunch, I would always see him eating alone in the cafeteria. I would just watch him sometimes. His mannerisms and things he'd do were just intriguing to me for some reason. One day I was coming out of the bathroom when I see him harassing some 6th grade girl and trying to get her to make out with him. In my stupid, naive 7th grader brain, it didn't register to me that what he was doing was wrong. I actually thought he was cool for doing it. I know. He looked over at me, smiled, and then walked away after the girl walked back into her classroom. The next day in English class was when we first began interacting with each other. I had to do a book report on Of Mice and Men, and when he saw me reading the book, he gave me his notes and told me to just copy his work but change it up a bit, so as not to make it obvious that I copied him. He said that reading was really boring and that he just skimmed through the plot of the book and movie on Wikipedia instead of actually reading the book. I thanked him and was genuinely thankful, as I too didn't like reading. I actually love that book now. Eventually, we would start hanging outside of class and would have lunch together outside in the quad. He told me he was interested in riding BMX bikes and motocross, so my earlier assessment of him was right, I suppose. I wasn't really into that stuff, so I just nodded my head and tried to act like I was genuinely interested in what he was saying. The whole time he'd talk, I just admire him for some reason. I'm not gay, for the record, never have been attracted to dudes, so it was really weird being so drawn to him the way I was. We started hanging out after school. He would come over to my house every day. At this point, he had completely won my mother over. He would always compliment her on the way she had the house decorated, or he would compliment her cooking, and he would talk to her about the show Teen Mom 2, which my mom really liked to watch, and apparently so did Chase. Over time, I started going over to his house. I wasn't as outgoing as he was, so I didn't immediately hit it off with his family, but they were nice people, and I liked them. Chase would always argue with his mom, though. One time she told us to go hang outside because she didn't want us playing Grand Theft Auto all day. This seemed to really piss Chase off, and he turned around and threw the controller at her, cracking her right in the forehead. I was sent home, and I was walking down the driveway. I could hear him screaming at his mother and calling her all kinds of horrible things that I won't even repeat here. The next day at school, he walked up to me at my locker and apologized for what happened at his house. I asked him if his mom was alright after being hit with a controller, and he said she ended up going to the ER to get stitches. He then said, "Too bad I had to just do that to get the bitch to shut up." As more and more time progressed, I had started spending more and more time at his house. His attitude towards me started to change. He would ridicule me for the clothes I would wear, always wore black band shirts, and he would make fun of me by calling me emo and gay every day. One night, when I was spending the night at his house, he said he wanted to play a game. The game was just called hide and seek tag in the dark, and he was it. So for the first round, we turned all the lights off in his house and I hid while he counted. Keep in mind, this was his idea, not mine. I thought it was weird that we were even playing this game, given our ages at the time. Nevertheless, I find a hiding spot in a crawl space under the staircase and I wait patiently. The house was pitch black and completely dead silent. Let me tell you that the atmosphere in the house was something straight out of a horror movie. I felt extremely uneasy and the hairs on my arm started to stand up. I couldn't hear a damn thing in that house. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this creepy ass laugh coming from outside the crawl space door. The door was cracked open and I could see Chase peeking in. He says in a low whisper, "You're screwed," before yanking the door open and opening fire. A barrage of BBs is flying at me at once. I didn't know there were BBs in the moment, so I literally thought I was being shot with actual bullets. The pop resembled an actual gun. He had emptied an entire magazine into me and I was in so much pain that I couldn't move. Once the pain subsided, I just left without saying another word to him. At school, he would stare at me and follow me to all of my classes. He would try to call and text me, but I would always ignore him. Eventually, he left me alone and a few years went by before I heard about him again, through a mutual friend. Supposedly, he had gone on the run after shooting his girlfriend in the head because she wouldn't let him have the last cigarette. He hasn't been seen or heard from since, and to this day, his whereabouts are unknown. His ex-girlfriend survived and made a full recovery. I find it so unsettling to think about how I was best friends with such a psychotic person. So today I was staying in a hotel about 275 miles from home. I've been in the city for a couple of days, but we just switched hotels last night due to the fact that the other one was mold infested and gross. Anyways, we are here to drop my brother off at college and tonight was his last night with us before we left. We decided to have a silly string fight in the hotel parking lot and run around outside of the hotel. Just fun, stupid teenager things. Somebody was standing on top of the stairs that led to the second floor of the motel, watching and staring at us. Not a big deal though. We were being pretty loud and obnoxious. My brother and mom left to bring my brother back to his dorm room. I decided to stay behind at the hotel room as all I had been doing for the past 3 days was riding in a car and I needed a break and I was on the phone with my friend Adrian. So I was just talking to Adrian when all of a sudden somebody knocks on the door. The same exact way my mom does. We have one of those secret knocks. I was about to swing open the door per usual, as I was 99% certain it was my mother, but something told me to look out the peephole for some reason. The person standing outside my hotel room door was the same person watching us earlier on top of the stairs. I'm very paranoid, so obviously I didn't answer the door. I start freaking out and talking to Adrian quietly, and the person yells, "Open this damn door," and starts banging harder. I sit there talking quietly to Adrian for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then slowly walk back up to the door and go to look through the peephole when this person slams their body weight against it and starts viciously shaking the handle. At this point, I text my brother on Snapchat at least 30 times to come back to the hotel. He says they're about 10 minutes away and just to sit tight and that he's coming back. He does, and by the time I get back, the person is gone. Definitely not the worst of experiences, but I'm still pretty shaken up by this. Edit. Last night, I went to the front desk as we were leaving to go take my brother back to his dorm. I decided to go with them when they came back to the hotel and told them if anyone asked for a key card to my room, to not give it to them. As with this motel, they don't require any ID or proof of you being in that room. You just ask for a key to that room. Apparently, my paranoia paid off because, according to the front desk clerk, the same person came and asked for a key to my room. I'm not sure what would have happened if I would have opened that door or if they would have managed to obtain a key to my room, and I don't want to find out. I've been needing to express myself about what happened between October 2017 and February 2019. So, for some backstory to try to answer some questions before they get asked. I graduated from school in 2016. I wasn't working at this time. It wasn't like that I didn't try to find work. I did, I just didn't get many calls back. I had a couple of job interviews, but they all fell flat. And it didn't help that I stupidly refused to put my resume forward to the local supermarkets because most of the high school bullies worked there, and the thought of working with a group of people who terrorized me for 4 years filled me with too much anxiety. So instead, I spent most of the time surrounded by the select few friends that I had, which, in the end, wasn't that many at all. I was always sort of the quiet one in high school, and early on into school, I got a girlfriend. I spent most of my time developing our relationship further instead of finding friends. A mistake I would have come to regret when we split up right before high school ended. I didn't really have many friends to fall back on. I had one really close friend all throughout high school that we will call Sam, as I don't want to use any real names. Sam was really supportive when I and my girlfriend broke up. He also had a great job and a really nice family, money, and friends, and at the time was a pretty good influence on me, as my parents would say. He didn't do any drugs or drink. I looked up to him as a person and as my best friend. So it was a really easy decision when Sam asked me to move in with him when he found a cheap rental property. His family were friends with a small real estate agent, so it was easy for Sam to find a house, even if it was stupidly overpriced for the condition of it. We were stupid and our parents just wanted us out. Sam's family believed he was too successful for them to need to support, and my parents, stepdad, wanted me out because he was tired of needing to support me. Again, I wasn't working. Sam and I moved out with his childhood friend, who we will call Blake. Now, before we moved, I had never met this person before. He was never really home because he was always out for work or dirt bike riding. He lived with us for about 4 months before the first big terrible event happened. Sam had let 2 strangers from Blake's perspective sleep in his bed when he was away from home. Blake got home one night around 2:30 a.m. ready for bed to walk into his room to see 2 people having sex in his bed. He left the next day, and as far as I know, to this day, after their last argument, they never talked to each other again. So after that brief introduction, this is where I'll get into the bulk of the story, starting from February 2018. At this point, I had a source of income. I had gotten a job through my dad, and I was enjoying being out of the house. By this time, I was starting to suspect that something was wrong with Sam. He wasn't leaving to go to work before me, which was weird. He was increasingly snappy and angry all the time, and he was leaving work early all the time and didn't tell me where he was going. In the end, he was cheating on his girlfriend at the time with a girl from our high school. The first few months with my friend acting this way, he would threaten to move all of my stuff out of the house and onto the road if I didn't do something he said. I like cleaning up the house on my own, going shopping, or doing any other various tasks. I didn't have much, only my mattress. He accidentally broke my bed frame while I was at work, and my office computer, which I used for Discord and playing small indie games, so it wouldn't have been hard for him to actually do it. He never did, but I guess it was because I never really argued with him. He started stealing my clothes, which didn't even fit him, and he would let me borrow his shirts to brag about how good of a friend he was. Eventually, he just stopped cooking food for himself. Sam's dad had given him a fuel card to use for petrol. He used to buy fast food twice a day for months, until his dad cut him off from the card, at which point he turned to 2-liter bottles of iced coffee and McDonald's nightly. I understand that this was more of his business and not mine, but he eventually asked me to cover his part of the rent, and he couldn't afford bills, which made it my issue. He asked me to buy him food, and when I refused, he would guilt trip me into feeling like absolute shit, or he would block the entrance to the house or my doorway to my room. I was already really anxious, since he had started getting more aggressive and angry, so I often agreed, which left me struggling with money. At some stage, he just stopped going to work, as he explained it. Work let me leave early today, and they said they would call me in again if they needed me. We got into an argument. I told him that he was wrong and he still had to go to work. It took him 10 weeks to call up his work, who explained to him they meant for that day, and that they had registered him as abandoning his job, so he had ended up unemployed. I tried to support him as much as he had for me during my breakup and when I moved in when I was unemployed, but he got really mad and angry all the time, which he took out on me, screaming at me for being right. Because all of his free time, he started inviting the girl from high school over all the time, threatening me to keep it a secret from his girlfriend. Obviously, in the end, I didn't, since I was close with Sam's current girlfriend. I was actively trying to stay out of the house, so I only ever saw this girl 2 or 3 times, but in reality, she was over all the time when I was at work. For the more tragic part of when I was living with him, he decided to buy some pets. He was given a bird from his family, and he bought a dog, which he called Sparta, and he decided to buy a cat, which he called Skittles, for the girl from high school, which ran away. He brought another cat and called it Skittles again, and the state that this kitten was left in was appalling when either the girl or I wasn't around the house. It was revealed that he would lock the kitten in a closet and only feed her when he remembered. I should have tried harder to protect the animals in the house. I tried my best to feed them when Sam wasn't around, but when he caught food missing, he would question me. When he found me feeding his cat, he grabbed me, slammed me into the wall, and screamed at me for poisoning his animals. I remember he hit me really hard. One day I came home and the bird that he kept near the door wasn't there and Sam wasn't home. I asked him where the bird was, and apparently it had fallen over in its cage and broken its neck. This was where immediate panic started, and I realized that I was living with someone who was much more than depressed. Sam came home later and I was ready to explode at him. I was fueled with rage and anger for what he had done to the bird. With an empty shoebox, he proceeded to go to our backyard. I followed him, and it turns out that he had the box to bury the kitten, who, according to Sam, broke its neck jumping around in the closet. I remember the way he told me vividly. He wasn't sad or angry. He was empty. His eyes felt hollow, and he told me he wasn't sad about it. He went back inside to his room and locked himself in there. I didn't see him for nearly a week. I came home one day from a very tiring day at work. I had requested to get this morning off to clean for a house inspection. At this point, I believe that this was our second one, so I stayed behind at work to do some overtime. Sam thought I was out for the night, and when I got home around 8:30, I found him and the girl from high school smoking weed in our lounge room. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. At this point, Sam wasn't the same person I went to high school with. Every day for the past 6 months, he had found a way to yell, steal, guilt, punch, kick, or threaten me. Nearly every day, there was always a reason he ate at me. They blamed me for what happened to the bird and cat because I wasn't there to help. This was one of the final turning points for me. I went to bed and had a sleepless night. I heard Sam insult me, and I heard him cheat on his girlfriend. I heard him lie about money, being employed, and using everything he remembered from high school to impress her. The next day, I told his girlfriend I stole his dog, who was incredibly malnourished, even after I had been sneakily feeding him a handful of dry food twice a day. I called the RSPCA and reported him for animal abuse. I emailed photos I took of the house for proof. I used the cover of the real estate agent coming over for an inspection to protect myself from him overreacting. When I came back to collect the last of my things, which was my old PC, I stupidly entered the house thinking our real estate agent was in there. I thought the car was there when it wasn't. I was greeted in the hallway by a shirtless Sam who pushed me against the wall. He smelled of weed and alcohol was burning into my skin. He pushed me up against the wall with one hand and had a knife in the other. There was a long argument, which was more him screaming at me and me shaking and not being able to spit my words out. He got angry when I told him where Sparta was, so he choked me and ran the silver of the knife down my arm. I remember feeling like I blacked out. Everything was a blur. He kept getting more and more intense, going on about how I betrayed him as a friend and his girlfriend dumped me over him. He let go of my neck and pushed me harder into the wall with his shoulder and drew the knife close to my neck. I truly felt like I was going to die. I muttered, "My friends can hear you." We were close enough to my room, and he often knows when I leave my room. I always have Discord open. He let go of me, and I ran away to my car and left. I stayed with my parents for a couple of days, living on their couch, too afraid to really talk to anyone. My parents called me Jumpy, and I told them that I missed them because I had hardly seen them over the past 10 months or so. Sam chucked me a message saying that we needed to talk, which we did in a public place. He told me that he was moving out back to his parents because he could no longer support himself and the house had too many bad memories for him. He left. To this day, I still have not seen him. This was around August 2018. People from high school stopped being his friends once the girl and I told all of our collective friends what he did and how he acted. I reported him to the police. Never pressed charges, but I told him I never wanted to see Sam again. I don't think anything ever came out of it. I couldn't afford to get a restraining order as I recall being told they cost money, but it is reported. I moved back into the house on my own. He left all of his furniture and bedding as they were, only taking his headphones, his PS4 and TV. From that moment on, I was alone and living in the house that my best friend nearly killed me in, sleeping on his couch in the lounge room because I couldn't afford my own. I was alone and I was in a really bad headspace. I stopped talking to all of my friends at work and I started having nightmares. So this was dating from October 2017 to August 2018. I was still in the house until early 2019, which, leaving in the aftermath of what Sam did to me, was as bad, if not worse, than living without him. The isolation and darkness and things I saw and regret not doing, like not being there to save the bird and the cat, still eat away at me. Things didn't get better, and then worse, until I met a girl. I have been writing this for about 3 hours, and I am more than happy to write up the other part of this story, which I will likely be doing once I feel more up for it. Talking about this has been really hard. So, where am I now? At the end of 2019, I met my current partner. She's absolutely incredible, and we actually bought a house together last month. We currently live with my parents until we move in 2 weeks, and I think all of my negative feelings about my old house and Sam have resurfaced due to me moving again. In the end, I'm still scared and cautious, but getting this off my chest is a way that I am moving forward and putting my old house behind me. This happened about 7 years ago when I was 16, and I'd all but forgotten about it until a few weeks ago when my mom brought it up. Necessary backstory. I grew up in a rural town in Australia. My house was 30 minutes out of town with 20 acres of thick bushland behind it and a driveway that was about a 5-minute drive on its own. The neighbor's house shared the driveway but was surrounded by 5 acres, so incredibly isolated. It always felt like a really safe place, because it was so far from other humans, but of course that comes with its own downsides. No one can hear you scream, but no one can hear you scream. In 2012, my brother graduated high school and my folks got sick of being so far out. Decided to rent the house out and move closer to town. But by then, my mom was so used to not having neighbors that annoyed the shit out of her. We once heard a neighbor sneezing and that was the last straw. So a year later, end of the lease, we moved back, but this time without my brother, who was settled at uni. When we went back, we moved into our original rooms and put all the furniture back, more or less how it was. Our room was the only one on the left side of the house. I chose it for the view of the shed, which used to have chickens, ducks, alpacas roaming around it. But the room felt different somehow, like it wasn't mine anymore. Instead of swapping rooms and having to do all my posters and stuff again, I just started sleeping with the light on. The only other thing that was different was the renters had left a horse float in a caravan in the paddock next to the shed. I couldn't have cared less, but Mom was calling the renters every other week to get them to move ASAP. Also, at this time, my dad was working with a mining company and installing a pipeline to an island off the east coast, so he was away for 4 weeks at a time. then home for 2 weeks, etc. So onward to the point. One night when my dad was away at work and it was just me and my mom at home, I was exhausted and went to bed really early. Ended up having the absolute worst dream of my life. I was a little shit at the time, being a 16-year-old girl, but I barely spoke for the next few days. It had truly shaken me to my core. It started with my dog barking, as she would for the entire 5 minutes anybody was coming down the driveway. I went out to get her, but it was pitch black. I could only just see her standing at the edge of the grass by the drive, and she was standing really aggressively in a way I only ever saw her due to kangaroos and the neighbor's dog. I started hearing footsteps crunching on the pebbles, then male voices coming from either side of the house. The dog was now running from left to right, going absolutely apeshit, and getting gradually closer to me, like they were closing in, and she was trying her hardest to protect me. I was trying to scream, but the only sound I could make was that of a labored breath, and I was completely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were laughing to each other and whispering. This kept going for what felt like an eternity, the mysterious male voices getting closer and closer, but never coming out of the shadows enough for me to know who they were. Eventually I woke up. It wasn't like a movie where I jumped up and was out of breath. I was lying in bed like a dead pharaoh, and my eyes opened like I had never been asleep. Only blinked. After a few days of acting weird, my mom asked what was up. She's not a talkative person, so she asked it offhandedly and wasn't looking at me. As I told her, she stopped what she was doing and looked at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. It turned out the night I had the dream, shortly after I went to bed, and just before sunset, 2 guys rocked up to the house saying they were there to collect the horse float. The dog went bananas at them, which was only strange because normally, as soon as you were close to her, she'd fall on the ground and demand belly scratches. Mom didn't recognize these guys as anyone in the group or family that rented from us, but they knew about the shit. And Mom wanted it gone, so she put the dog in her lockup and took them up to it. One of them took it upon themselves to take a walk around the back of the house, parallel to the shed, behind the dog lockup, then came back and pointed out that there was only one car in the driveway and that he had noticed before there was a van. Whose van was it? He even said something like, "Husband not home tonight?" while looking out my window with light coming through the curtains. To say the least, my mom was freaked out. How did he know how many cars we have when she's never met either of them before? In an instant, she thought they must have come around before, seen 2 cars and gone away. Following the man's gaze to my room, she let out a relaxed laugh and said Dad was in there cleaning his guns, but he's probably done now and she'll go get him so he can help with the float. The most intense weapon my dad has ever owned is a rusty machete, so I have no idea where that came from on my mom's end, but I'm eternally glad for it. They protested and said they could manage it, but she bolted inside, locked all the doors, and then stood by the front window with a knife and watched them drive away without the horse float. When Dad got home a week or so later, he called the renters up in a fit of rage and found out they hadn't sent anyone to go get it for them, but all their friends knew it was there because they'd been trying to organize help to get both in one day. Purely because I was sleeping with a light on at the time it happened, and because I went to bed early that night, my mom and I escaped a potentially seriously horrific situation. Because just if my dumbass were there, I would have instantly declared, "Nope, just us home tonight."